Hey friends, it's Laurie. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm participating in a Trash to Treasure collab with 5 of my crafty friends. I'll link the amazing playlist below in my description. Please be sure to check it out and see what trash they turned into treasure. I'm starting my Trash to Treasure bird feeder using some sticks from Mother Nature. As the base for my project, I'm recycling these 3 tin cans. I used a can opener to open these 3, but there are pull-off tops on some of the tin cans. Once you pull off the top, they can leave a really sharp edge. My clippers were handy, so I just used those and I pressed the sharp edge down against the can. And so if you do have the pull-off tops, those will work fine, and this way they won't be sharp on the edges. I'll also be using 3 large craft sticks and some of the nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, but you can use any rope that you have on hand. To block up the front so the seed doesn't fall out, I'm following the rounded shape with my pencil and then I'm cutting it out. Once I had it cut out, I checked the fit and then I hot glued it into place. After my first one was complete, I then followed the same instructions for the other 2. With all my seed stoppers in place, I'm now taking my sticks, I'm measuring them against the front, and I'm cutting them to size. At the same time, I'm also cutting extras to cover the back of my can. I now have a pile of cut sticks and I'm using my glue gun to glue them across the front of my craft stick. Because the sticks aren't perfect, you're still going to see little hints of the craft stick underneath, so all I'm doing is cutting a few more pieces. I'm layering them on the top so it's no longer visible. When I'm done, I turn the can around and I'm following the exact same instructions, making sure that both ends of the can have the sticks heading in the same direction. This is a rustic project, so you don't have to be super fussy. I'm just continuing to add the sticks until I can no longer see the silver end of the can. With both ends of the can complete, I'm now cutting the sticks to cover the sides. I'm allowing myself a slight overhang on each side of the can, and I'm just cutting an assortment of different shapes and sizes of sticks that I picked up in my yard. When I had a handful cut, I used my glue gun and started gluing them around the side of the can. Because the sticks are all different shapes and sizes, it's not exactly perfect, but that's what gives it the rustic vibe. One of the fun things about making this is if you don't want it to be a bird feeder, all you need to do when you finish is attach it to a tree and it turns into a bird house. When I'm done, I can see some areas of silver still peeking through, so all I'm doing is adding on a few extra sticks here and there until I can no longer see any of the silver. When my first can is covered and finished, I then make 2 more, so I have 3 in total. I'm adding a perch to the bottom of each of my feeders, and I'm taking a longer stick. I'm kind of measuring it on the bottom, and then I'm cutting it to size. When I'm done, I use my hot glue gun. I attach it on the bottom, making sure that it's centered in the middle. When my first one was complete, I then did the same for my other 2, and I made sure that the perches all were about the same length. Attaching the feeder together, I'm starting with 2 on the bottom. I'm adding a generous amount of hot glue to one side and doing the same to the other side of the feeder. Then I'm just attaching them both together. I then held them in place for about a minute so the glue could set up. I'm adding my last feeder to the top and I'm making sure that it's centered on the bottom too. Once I have it in place, I'm again adding some hot glue and I'm attaching it to the bottom feeders. If you want to sit your feeder atop something, then you're done. All you need to do is add some seed, but I'm going to hang mine, so I'm going to attach a hanger. I'm using some of the nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, but you can use anything you have on hand. I'm placing it under my bird feeder. I'm deciding about how long I want the hanger to be, and then I'm tying a tight double knot on the top. When I was done, I cut off the extra rope, and I tucked my two side rope tails under, and I hot glued them into place. When I was done, I then added some additional hot glue to the sides of the rope to hold them into place. Now that my Trash to Treasure bird feeder is complete, I'm adding on a double end snap to hang it, and you can adapt just about anything to hang this feeder. The last thing I need to do is invite the birds to come on over and check out the feeder, so I'm adding in some bird seed. I hung my feeder and I added a few seeds on the top to entice the birds, and I'd say within a minute I had my first little guest. I'm starting my Pinecone Wreath bird feeder by using a bunch of pine cones that I picked up around my yard. To dry out the sap, I bake them in a 200-degree oven, single layered for about 30 minutes. The size of your wreath will determine how many pine cones you need to use. For my base, I'm using this 12-inch Dollar Tree willow wreath, but you can use anything that you have on hand. I'm using about a roll and a half of this Dollar Tree green burlap. It's not the color I wanted, but I'll show you what I end up doing to it. I'm also going to be using one of the little wooden crates that I found in the craft department at the Dollar Tree. And to give the wreath a dual purpose as either a bird feeder or a bird bath, I'm using this 2-pack of small plastic containers from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I'm going to do is add some Mod Podge and help seal up my willow wreath. I'm using an old foam brush to get in between all the nooks and crannies, and once the front is done, I then turn it over and I do the back. When I'm done with the wreath, I'm now going to paint the sides and the bottom of my little wooden crate, making sure not to get any of the Mod Podge inside. I'm once again using an assortment of sticks that I picked up in my yard. I'm measuring and cutting them just like I did for my tin can bird feeder. And just like the tin can bird feeder, this is a rustic piece, so not to worry if some of the sticks are a little longer or shorter than the others. When I have enough cut, I'm using my glue gun and I'm attaching them to the side of the crate. As I'm adding the sticks, I can see there are gaps because none of the sticks are straight or perfect. And all I'm going to do when I'm done filling in the side is just kind of go back and layer on more sticks until I no longer can see the crate. When I'm done, I then turn the crate around and do the exact same thing on the other side. With both of my sides complete, it's now time to cut the sticks for the ends and hot glue those into place. And once again, after one side was done, I turned it around and I did the same on the other. Then to finish up the crate, I'm cutting some sticks for the bottom and I'm hot gluing those on as well. Once I had my first layer on, I continued layering them until I could no longer see the crate. Now that it's finished, I'm setting it aside and I'm going to prep the wreath. Now that my wreath has dried, I'm going to wrap it with this green Dollar Tree burlap. I really wanted the natural colored one, but my Dollar Tree didn't have any, so I'm just using the green and adding a little dot of hot glue on the wreath, and then I'm starting to wrap it around. After I wrap it around a few times, I'm then adding a dot of hot glue to help hold it in place. When my first roll was done, I just added some hot glue, added the second roll, and followed the same instructions. Now that my wreath is completely wrapped and it's this pretty green color that I don't want, I really want the pine cones to blend with it, so I'm using some brown paint and I'm giving the whole thing a coat on both sides. I'm attaching the feeder part of the bird feeder, and I'm taking 2 pieces of floral wire and I'm folding them in half. I'm attaching the floral wire by adding some hot glue on the center edge of each side. Once the glue has cooled, I'm placing the wires over the wreath and I'm twisting them into place. When I'm done, I'm just bending over the excess wire. With my pine cones out of the oven and cooled, I'm going to start attaching them to the wreath. Using my glue gun, I'm attaching them to the outside middle of the wreath at an angle, and I'm heading counterclockwise. As I'm attaching the pine cones, I have the stick crate kind of like bent and resting on the side of the wreath, but once I move closer to it, I'll be attaching pine cones around it. I'm using some of the same nautical rope that I used in my first project. I'm sliding it around the wreath to make my hanger. I decided how long I wanted to make it, and then I cut off the excess rope and I made a knot. I gave the rope a little hot glue to help hold it in place, and then I continued on adding my pine cones. With my outside layer complete, I'm adding a second row of pine cones, and all I'm doing is hot gluing them against the wreath. I'm having them lean slightly on the first layer and I'm keeping them at an angle. When I'm gluing the pine cones near the bottom of the crate, I'm just kind of holding it up with my hand, and then with my other hand I'm adding the hot glue and I'm adding some pine cones underneath it. Now that my second row is complete, I'm starting my third, and I'm starting under the stick crate and I'm adding another layer of pine cones. And now I'm just continuing on and I'm adding the pine cones to my third and my inside row. This side of my wreath is complete, and now I'm going to turn it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm adding my second row of pine cones, and some of you may know I basically live in a pine forest and I have thousands and thousands of pine cones all around me. I was inspired during the holidays to make this pretty pine cone wreath, and I'll actually link that below in case you'd like to check it out. And so when I was looking for a trash to treasure project and I have these millions of pine cones everywhere, I thought, hey, why not make a wreath that's a bird feeder? So that's kind of how I was inspired to make this. And now I'm finishing up by adding on my third row. If you'd like to make this a small bird bath instead of a bird feeder, drill 3 or 4 holes through the bottom of the crate before adding the sticks. And then just treat the inside wood with a non-toxic wood sealer. Then add a plastic basin to hold the water. My wreath bird feeder is finally complete. This part is completely optional, but I found these 2 little blue containers at the Dollar Tree and I'm going to add them onto the bottom of my crate. I'm placing my seed in them, but they would also work great if you wanted to use them as the bird bath. I added in some bird seed, and with that, my Rustic Wreath bird feeder is complete. I hope you had fun making these projects with me, and if you're new and you haven't yet subscribed and you think, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. And please be sure to check out my friends and the amazing Trash to Treasure playlist that I'll have linked below in my description. I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.